Hello, everybody. Everybody joining. Hello, hello, hello. Give us just a moment. We're just a couple little technical settled. Give us just about one more minute and then we'll get this party started. I thank everybody for attending. Hopefully everybody out there in the world is good, safe and healthy, and your family is safe and healthy as well. I'm going to give it about another minute and then we'll go ahead and get started. Give it about another 15 seconds. All righty. Welcome everybody to OpsumX's webinar. The webinar is Managing Spinnaker Pipelines. My name is Marky Jackson. I'm the Director of Open Source Software for OpsumX, and I'm joined today by Sagai. Sagai is a DevOps architect at OpsumX, and I'm super thrilled to have him. He's a super knowledgeable person. I would like to start off by thanking everybody for joining and taking the time out of your day to listen to me ramble and Sagai present awesome things. Just a few announcements and housekeepings before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, just make sure to type them into the question box in the Zoom control panel, and we'll address the questions during the presentation when appropriate. And then mostly it'll be at the end of during the Q&A. I'll be asking several poll questions during the webinar today, and these are questions that sort of give Sagai an idea of who's in the audience so that we can customize and adapt presentations a bit to our audience. These questions are completely optional, but if you answer them, we'd appreciate it, and we'll share the poll results with you when it's appropriate. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. For those of you that may be new to OpsumX, we're a venture-based startup. We're based in Silicon Valley. And we help enterprise organizations modernize and transform their software delivery with Spinnaker. We provide an enterprise-ready distribution of Spinnaker called Open Enterprise Spinnaker, manage Spinnaker as a service, as well as Spinnaker onboarding, training, and support services to help enterprises really adopt and scale continuous delivery and Spinnaker in their organizations. Before we start our presentation, I'm going to go ahead and start with a couple poll questions. So the first question we're going to say is, are you currently doing continuous delivery? If yes, what percentage of your production applications are using that? And then the second question is your current or is your organization currently evaluating or using Spinnaker? If you could just go ahead and type that in there, I'll give it about 15 seconds for everybody to enter in their information. Give it about another 10 seconds. Praveen said yes, he's currently using continuous delivery and they are using Spinnaker. That is awesome. All right, give it about another 3 seconds. If anybody wants to get in there real quick. Awesome. Let me go ahead and share those results. And we can see that we got no one in dev and test. We have less than 10% saying yes. We've got 56%, that's more using more than 50%, and 22% not doing continuous delivery. For organizations currently evaluating or using Spinnaker, we have 33% that are evaluating it, 11% that are using it but not in production, 33% using it in production, and 22% of the polling is not evaluating or using Spinnaker. So that's pretty telling. That's pretty awesome if you ask me. So let's go ahead and I'm going to let Sagai take over, and he's going to show you today's presentation. So Sagai, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you.
Thank you, Marky, for the nice introduction. Good evening, everybody, and good morning to you as well, for those of you in the US and other part. Okay, my name is Sagai Raj. I'm going to walk you through the Spinnaker, how to set up pipeline and do a couple of basic operations with pipeline. So before we jump on to Spinnaker, let me quickly tell you the Spinnaker tool as such, it is a homegrown tool developed by Netflix back in 2014 to manage their large scale deployment into their high, high available infrastructure such as AWS. Over the period of time, the tool has matured enough that it is able to perform more deployments at a high frequency and also with reliability. So in 2015, towards the end of it, they actually open source this tool, and this is backed by more companies, the giants like Google, Microsoft, and even more companies, including Opsamex. We partner with the Spinnaker tool, and we enhance the tool. So currently, this has a large, vibrant community and support. So if at all anyone has to choose why Spinnaker over other CD platforms, because the tool as such supports multi-cloud environment deployment, and this is open source. So open source free for everyone. So what all the cloud platforms that it supports is basically all the major clouds like AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure, and other cloud environments are also joining in like Red Hat OpenStack, Oracle Cloud, and of course today everyone is moving towards containerized applications like Kubernetes and OpenShift. So Spinnaker as a continuous delivery tool supports all of these cloud environments. So which means an application that is a monolithic can also be deployed into VMs, and start this practice with Spinnaker, and then slowly you can move into Kubernetes based containerized microservice architecture. So this tool helps releasing the softwares quite often and repeatability with more control. What it means is you can create immutable images no matter whether it is a Docker image or cloud-based machine image. All that can be created and deployed into the target environment quickly. And if there is any problem, quicker rollbacks are possible. And of course, as a continuous delivery tool, it needs support from the CI systems such as Jenkins or Travis CI. Those systems can be plugged in to receive build outputs. Like, at the end of the code commit, you essentially want to do your compilation, create package out of it, and pass that package to deploy into an environment. These are all possible with Spinnaker. So no matter whether it is a Docker image or AWS AMI image. And this is a tool called Halyard to support administrative activities, part of the Spinnaker management. So I'm going to show you to set up pipeline, but before understanding pipeline, we need to understand certain terminologies that is used in Spinnaker. So we will first start with an application whenever we want to deploy a pipeline. So we need to create an application. So what is an application? It is simply, you can simply think it of as a microservice or a monolithic application if you are setting it up for a EC2 machines. So it is simply an application that you set up in Spinnaker, and underneath the application you will actually mention who is the point of contact or the owner, and what all the cloud providers that you're going to deploy to, maybe AWS and Kubernetes or just Kubernetes. These in configurations will be there. And then the cloud provider is basically the set of target cloud environments that Spinnaker supports. You essentially create an interface with it. And account is another term that usually you can configure one or more account to connect with any number of cloud environment. So this will have your credential connected with your target environment. For example, if you want to talk to Kubernetes cluster to make your deployment, you will essentially have a name and the kube config file will be associated with it. So when going to the pipeline, you will choose the account and perform the deployment or set up a pipeline and perform the deployment. If it is a AWS environment, and if the if the Spinnaker is deployed within the AWS infrastructure, your account would essentially have the IAM role configured, or if it is outside of the AWS infrastructure, then you will have AWS access key and secret key configured in the account. So that will uh, take your deployment to talk to your cloud environment and perform image building and instance creation or cluster spinning. So the most important term pipeline means it is a sequence of stages in Spinnaker, which is the base for the entire continuous delivery cycle, and it will add up one after the other stages chained together. So each stage is responsible for performing an action. So those stages maybe you calling a Jenkins system to perform a build. So instead of going to Jenkins UI, you can even perform the entire pipeline within Spinnaker. So you're calling Jenkins build is one of the stage, and also with the AWS connected, you can bake an image, or you can even create a Docker image from it. So creating an image, we call it as baking here, and the stage will be baking stage. And once the baking stage is done, you will go into deployment, selecting a particular account, and you may have different accounts representing different environments. So for example, if you have staging and pre-dev staging, pre-prod environment. So three different environments are there. You may set up three different accounts here to perform your deployment. And trigger is the other term that essentially tells how to start a pipeline without manual intervention. So such as whenever there is a git code commit in GitHub, you want to trigger a build upon every pull request or pull request in a branch, or some when there is a Docker build created, you want to deploy on a latest release onto the target environment immediately. So these are the situations or the use cases that you look at when you want to trigger an automated build. So those triggers are actually comes under the trigger configuration. So like GitHub, Jenkins, Docker build, you can also connect with other CI systems, or even cron jobs can be linked. And part of your pipeline deployment, Spinnaker may need to get artifacts or the files from different systems, like the one we have just talked, maybe from a S3 bucket or GCS storage from Google, or even Docker Hub. So those things are configured as artifact in Spinnaker. So we are going to jump into the demo. So for that, the requirement is, if you are doing this setup, you need to have a working Spinnaker installed. So in case if anyone wants to know how to install a Spinnaker quickly, we have on our same webpage, opsamix.com, we have already executed webinar. You can go and register yourself, get the video, and go back how to install it, or you can refer the Spinnaker IO documentation to install it. But this video will quickly get your environment up and running in 10 to 15 minutes maximum. So an environment is needed. So I'm going to open up my environment. Browser is opening. Okay, so my Spinnaker environment is set up with the TLS authentication, TLS encryption, and authentication and authorization is enabled. So basically authentication, you connect with the various providers like LDAP or SAML integration, something like that, or you can even talk to any other identity providers. So we have it integrated with the OpenLDAP. So let me open up my terminal as well. Okay, so I have the environment ready. Okay, there was a timeout issue, not to worry. Okay, so we'll first create an application. The way we do it is, I mean, as we talked about the terminologies, first thing we should have is an application. Go to the application page. On the action menu, create an application. So you fill out your details. And these are the mandatory fields you need to fill up. So other than these fields, rest can be kept open. So here one more field would appear if you have configured more accounts, like more cloud providers. By default, my Spinnaker instance is installed on Kubernetes environment. Therefore, it would consider the target environment to be deployed is a Kubernetes cluster. So if you have enabled more than one cluster, you may also find one more option here. What is the cloud provider to choose? Maybe like AWS, Azure, and GCP. Okay, here we have three different tabs. We are concerned with pipeline initially, but if you look at infrastructure and task, infrastructure is the one that is an abstract of your cloud environment. Like if it is installed in AWS, you will have what is the cluster and how many nodes are currently running in auto scaling group. Your load balancer and your firewall information, everything will pop up here. So we'll, in the pipeline tab, we will create a pipeline. So basically, there are two options to create a pipeline. The pipeline is you set up every stage. The template is um, across different teams in an organization. If you have come up with a standardized way of doing the entire pipeline, you define a templatized pipeline and you save it in the Spinnaker. Once it is saved, everybody else would just inherit the template and create a pipeline. So we'll first go with a simple pipeline. So I'm going to deploy Nginx. So a pipeline is created. Now, as you can see, the first stage without any stage is a configuration stage. In the configuration, you are going to essentially configure um, your triggers, how the pipeline should be triggered. So to start, the different options are whenever there is a Jenkins build is completed, you may want to execute a Jenkins build here. So for that, you choose this one. And if there is a Jenkins configured, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, there is a program called Halyard that we are not covered as part of this presentation. In the Halyard, you can enable the interfacing of systems. Like Jenkins, you need to go to the Halyard system to configure what is the Jenkins URL, the user credential, so that Spinnaker can communicate with Jenkins. So those systems you can configure. Similarly, GitHub can be configured. So you can choose GitHub and your username, project, etc. So for this also to happen, again you have to use Halyard program to configure. In the interest of time, those will be the administrative longer process. So we are not covering those steps here, but we have good documentation and videos in our website. So right now I'm skipping the trigger part, which means I have to manually invoke the pipeline build. So Nginx deployment, save the changes. By doing so, you have a pipeline created, and this pipeline will do nothing as of now. So you add a stage. Now every stage comes with a type and stage name and depends on. So what it means is, for the very beginning of the pipeline, you will have to depend on no other stage. That means this is the first stage, and for every other sequential stage, your previous stage will become the depends on stage. Here the type would be, I'm for this example I'm going to deploy a what do you call the Nginx manifest file. So here all the type of stage types are available, so you choose which one you're going to select from. So deploy manifest, deploy a Kubernetes manifest YAML file, that is the description. You choose that stage, and stage name can be anything of your choice. Spaces are allowed, no problem. And account, currently I have three accounts added. So the default account is where my Spinnaker is running, and I plan to deploy onto dev environment as well as staging environment. That means there are two clusters, or even if there are a single cluster, you can create a different namespace and set the context and add the account using Haliot program. So once the account is available, you can choose the environment over here and go with deployment. So for a deployment, basically there are two options. You can simply paste the manifest file over here, or you can configure Helm artifact, which would bring your Helm chart, or you can also configure a GitHub repository that will fetch the manifest directly from the GitHub. So we'll go with plain manifest over here. So if you see, this is a Kubernetes manifest file. I hope most of you would aware of the Kubernetes deployment. For those of you who don't know, a deployment objects essentially creates a replica set, and replica set in turn will create pods, and pod will contain your microservice image version and the port it is running on. Those kind of configuration will be there. So for Nginx, we are using this particular tag to deploy, and it is running on the port 80. So once the pod is running, to expose it outside, Kubernetes provides the option of creating a service, and we will go with load balancer service that will be accessible on the service port 8. And of course, the load balancer will directly talk to every node that the pod is running. So this is the node port that the pod will be running when deployed. So there are no other settings to be configured for a deployment stage. So this pipeline is created. Now we can go and execute the deployment. So you see there are no executions. I'm starting the build. Currently running executions are shown in blue color. The ones that are already completed will be shown in green, and anything is failed will be in red color. So we can check what is the error. Okay, so the target environment needs to have appropriate permission that Spinnaker is configured with. So we can go back and edit the configuration. So this account has the permission. Okay, it's running. It will take few seconds before it completes. Okay, like I said, so when it was executing, it was in blue color. Now it is completed and the status is green. So if you expand this one, the execution details, this would contain your deployment manifest files. And also you can go to the infrastructure tab to see your deployment. So here the deployment means, okay, your deployment currently has one deployment and this has just one single pod. So, and also if you look at your load balancer service, this is going to contain your load balancer IP. So take this IP and access it on the port 8000 because in the manifest we have seen, or we can just, okay, service. Okay, sorry. So it is a service YAML file. We need to take a look at it. So here we see that port 8000 is what is configured. So I have taken the ingress IP or the load balancer IP and call the IP address. Cool. So the Nginx is deployed and we are able to see it. So this is a very simple pipeline to show you how to set up a pipeline. And similarly, I just want to show you that when you configure a pipeline, there are different stages. You will get it here. This list will grow to a large number. That means whenever you enable AWS support, stages related to AWS will pop up here. It will not directly pop up here, but your application has to support your cloud provider. You have to go to your configuration page to enable your cloud provider. By doing so, the stages for your target environment, target cloud will change accordingly. Okay, sorry. Maybe not, you know. What is my application? Maybe the refresh is slow here. Ah, here it is. I was shocked. Okay, so we have seen how to set up a pipeline and execute a pipeline. Now the other actions connected with pipelines are here in the configuration. Okay, select your pipeline. The other actions connected with the pipeline are I mean, this is a simple rename. If you want to rename your pipeline to something else, you would do it this way. And we are going to delete it. If you don't want to want this pipeline, you can delete it. And there are two actions: disable and lock. So what disable means, you set up a pipeline for testing everything and you made it ready. And now further, you don't want anyone to trigger a pipeline on this, trigger any execution on this pipeline. For that sake, you go and disable it, and there will not be any actions on it. And lock is simply that it disables editing the pipeline configuration from the UI perspective. Though the editing is still possible through API calls, you can still make modifications to your staging configuration. But within the UI, which you are given to all of your user, you can actually lock it to make any updates. And we have an history, version history supported. Whenever you make a pipeline edit, version history will be there if you have stored it in a S3 bucket or GCS storage. So the external storage that you configure it will make these versions available for you. But in case you have used, just like me, the Minio storage service, it has no versioning capability, so we had to disable it, and therefore this version is unavailable. But if it is there, we can go and review different versions of the pipeline that someone has edited. Okay, so this is the pipeline. Once you manually set up your pipeline, this all stored as a JSON object. So this is what we call it as pipeline as code, right? So this code you can actually, once generated, you can commit into your source control repository, and any changes here, someone can manually edit it, and changes here will trigger the pipeline here automatically. And the stages can be customized by coding and keeping the source of the truth in the version control tool. And finally, this object, as part of the JSON, right? Anything that you edit here is a free form. That means this tool will not do any validation, JSON syntax, and that is mandated by the Spinnaker pipeline. All it does is it generates whatever you are doing it in the UI, it will generate the code, JSON code, and show it up for you. In case if you need to tweak the configuration, you can come here, edit the pipeline, save it. And sometimes if there is a glitches in the UI, you can make use of this functionality to edit, and then finally you can take this code back to your version control to preserve the source of truth. Okay, so this is the important part, export as a pipeline template. So what it will do is, let's say you have more than one team, and every team comes up with their own best practices. Now all the teams synergize their ideas and pipeline process, and they create one single pipeline template. And once it is created in the Spinnaker, every other team will inherit that pipeline template and use as it is, or add additional configuration in the new pipeline that they have set up. So for that, you can export this pipeline as a base to create your template. So this will essentially bring back every pipeline configuration what you have seen in the previous window. So that is essentially from the line number 11 to this one. 11 to 102. This was your pipeline code without pipeline template. This was your pipeline code. So when you create a template, the additional features that it carries over is the the scope and metadata information. I think it is at the bottom. Yeah, the schema version will be there. So pipeline templates, there are two versions. Currently version 2 is in effect. So this will be active. And variables are the ways that how you want to pass your configurations to the template that has been defined globally. So you define variables here. This that will contain what is the data type, what is the variable name, and the default value. These three things are mandatory. And once you mention these variables become a configuration part to your pipeline. So first I need to save this one. Okay, so I should have given a name. It has taken the default name. So using this pipeline, using this template, we can actually define new pipelines. So like this, I have also created previous templates. So if we see this one, how the variables look like, we can see. So there is a default, sorry, there is a variable name called account name, and there is a type string. And I also have a replica, which is of integer type. So with these inputs, you can create a new pipeline here. So just make a note of this uh, template. Okay, for advanced editing of this pipeline templates, you might have to use the SpinCLI utility, which can be downloaded from this Spinnaker IO website. But for the basic functionality, this is more than enough. Once you want to update it, you will download this file, edit it, use the SpinCLI command to upload back to the Spinnaker. Okay, so I have this pipeline template ready. So based on this one, we can create pipeline directly from here, or you can go to the main menu. So I'm going to choose this. Creating a pipeline based on template. Okay, so I have shown you there are two variables defined. Now you see those variables as part of your pipeline creation, the configuration window will be given to you. So without this configuration, you cannot go next. So your default account can be typed to change a different value because it is a string, and you can change the number of replicas. So default, we have mentioned it as 2, but you can choose 1 or anything of your choice. Now this pipeline, you see there is a lock over here. This means that you cannot edit the pipeline, templated pipeline. I mean your pipelines, your template cannot be edited. Okay, so the difference between a normal pipeline and a template based pipeline is the icon over here. The normal pipeline just shows your account where the pipeline is deployed to, and the template based one has a grid over here. So this is how you set up your pipeline from a template. Okay, so I think that's all I have for you to show as part of what are the pipeline actions you can do. The more in-depth information or the video we have uploaded in our website, and we also have dedicated videos on our YouTube channel as well. You can please visit OpsMX. Marky, that's all from my presentation side.
Awesome, awesome, great. Thank you, Sagai. That was a really interesting demo and very rich feature set that Spinnaker offers in terms of pipeline for CD and integration with CI tools such as Jenkins. So we've got some questions from the audience, and this is probably a good time to start the Q&A. Okay, everyone. So if you need to ask any questions, definitely do so by going to the webinar control panel at the bottom of your window, or you can directly ask to raise your hand, and I can unmute you. But it's easier just to type it in there, and I'll read your awesome question. So the first question that we have is, after disabling the pipeline, if we need to enable it, how?
Okay. So for example, this is the pipeline. Okay, one more thing I can touch upon. This has RBAC control. The person who logs in with ability to write. I mean, there are for the application you have read, write, and execute permission. The person with write permission can enable, disable pipelines. So the lead or the privileged user can go to the pipeline configuration again. I mean, suppose if I had it disabled this way, and you see this, it says that pipeline is disabled, nobody can start it. So that's the behavior you get it. So now your question is how to enable it back. The privileged user can go back to the same pipeline window and enable it.
Awesome, awesome. Hopefully that answers the individual's question. The next question is, we have, how do you configure on-prem servers in the infra tab?
Can you read that again, please?
For on-premise servers, is there the ability in the infrastructure tab to configure that?
No. Spinnaker, like we have talked the cloud providers, right? So in the cloud providers, there has to be a support added in the tool as such. So currently, it does not support on-prem environment. Of course, if you have a Kubernetes cluster installed on your on-prem environment, all it needs is the kubeconfig file to communicate with your on-prem environment. But systems like VMware, if you want to connect and deploy the application, there is no ready-made solution available with Spinnaker.
Awesome, thank you. Next question is, where to go? What is the architecture of Spinnaker? How many components are there, and the usage of the same, which I believe the individual is asking, how many components are there, and what are their usages?
Okay, if I had to tell you the different this is a big system. Spinnaker itself does a lot of orchestration. So there are about 10 services. Apart from that, there is an additional service, Halyard. So to communicate with the different cloud providers, the service is cloud driver, and the entire orchestration like baking and deployment. These orchestrations are governed by the system called Arca. So I mean that translates to orchestration. So Arca is another microservice to communicate with various CI systems like Jenkins and Travis CI, etc. The service Iger is used. And if I have to recall the other things, cloud driver, Iger. Echo is the one that takes care of event notification. So whenever there is a build completed, you want to notify to Slack channel or email notification, Echo comes into picture. And all of these are connected through the API system called the gate, and that includes the system deck, which is responsible for the UI part. What we are seeing it here, the deck service is responsible for UI. Even this deck will communicate with communicate through gate with other systems. And any external parties will communicate with the gate, and this storage, I mean, the metadata information of the service like application, who is the owner, pipeline information, and its configuration are all preserved in an external storage, and a service that talks to the external storage like AWS S3, that is front 50, which is responsible for this one. Did I answer
Excellent,
that question?
excellent. I believe you did. You can also, for the individual that asked that question, you can go to our OpsMX YouTube page and you'll see a 5-minute video on there that I've done that explains this architecture more in detail. Next question I got is, does Spinnaker support fetching artifacts from Nexus or JFrog?
Yes, it does not directly support, I mean, it supports Nexus and JFrog, but backend, those tools are essentially like you set up what type of artifact that it provides. So using Nexus, you may set up Docker registry, you may set up Maven repository, you may set up art repository. So these are the different type of repositories you will set up. So Helm repository is another one. So this is the type of artifact that you will configure in Spinnaker, but not directly your Nexus configuration.
Excellent, excellent. Next question I have, this is a really nice demo. Can you show how the firewall tab looks like and how do you configure that?
Okay, firewall tab, essentially for a Kubernetes infrastructure, we don't have that information. But if we have set up a pipeline that talks to AWS, for example, right? There are three different tabs under infrastructure: cluster, load balancer, and firewall. The cluster will represent your auto scaling group, and load balancer will represent your application load balancer ALB, and firewall will represent your security group.
Excellent, excellent. Couple more questions. Uh, does it, let me just read this here. Does it allow for us to edit pipelines that are created using the templates, right? If we want to edit a pipeline that's created using a template, any idea how we can do that?
Yeah, actually, this pipeline, this you can still add stages. You go here, add stage, and that stage you may where you want to pin it. I mean, this is the deploy stage. Let me say depends on which stage. So basically, the edit permission currently is disabled for me. But the way here it is, once you can come and add and configure the stages. But after it is saved, no, let me add something. Bake. Bake manifest Helm chart. Oops, scroll please. So I can set up Helm 3 baking. Okay, so I have not configured up Helm. So what do I do? Scroll please. It's not doing. Okay, I'm not able to. So here you can edit. You can add configuration, but once saved and you edit the stages here, right? You will see the additional stage here. I'm sorry. Thankfully, here it is. See, The stages are not visible because they are coming from the template. Oops. Select. Okay. The stage over here. There is no stages that is configured manually over here, but we can add another stage and that will go on pin. Check preconditions. For the simplicity, I will just scroll down. I will just scroll down and save it. Please come. Oh, I'm sorry, there is a problem in the scroll. I'm unable to go down and save it. But if I
That's
can
fine. We
explain
can,
to you, you can
yes.
edit the pipeline configuration just like how you do it, but the change will be preserved as a separate entity within your pipeline configuration, which will have a parent section. What is the template that inherits and any additional stages in the pipeline JSON file. That's how it is. You cannot edit the pipeline template as a owner of this pipeline. That's what I was trying to say earlier.
Excellent. Excellent. That's all the time that we have for questions right now. What I would like to do is put up one final poll. And in this poll, if you would like to, for us to follow up with you in regards to sending these presentation slides, or you're interested in Spinnaker training or onboarding or support, or you'd like to schedule a demo for OptumX's Open Enterprise Spinnaker or our Autopilot continuous verification tool, I'm going to go ahead and throw this poll up, and you can enter in your information there, and we can definitely get this. And also, if you have any other questions, there were a few more questions that we weren't able to get to in the time available. But if you want to ask those questions in here, we can definitely reach back out to you. And I'll leave this up for about another 30 or so seconds, maybe 40 seconds or so. And then while that's up, I'm going to go ahead and just say that I wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. And I want you to, if you have any questions or you want to know more about Spinnaker or OpsumX, please make sure to check out opsumx.com. You can see our calendar for upcoming webinars or tech talks, as well as blogs and other educational content on Spinnaker and continuous delivery. So I'm going to leave this up for about another 10 seconds. Everybody can put their information in. And I will close with this and say, I'm super thankful for everybody that joined, and I hope you have a great day. Stay safe, and we'll see you all online.